Joan of Arc was born in Domremy, France in 1412. Her father's name was Jacques d'Arc, and her mother's was Isabelle. They were both of humble peasant stock. Joan had 3 older brothers, Jean, Pierre, and Jacques, and one older sister named Catherine. Joan grew up during a time when France was experiencing a tremendous period of political upheaval. France was mired in the Hundred Years' War, which had started in 1337 when King Charles IV of France died without a male heir. Edward III, the King of England, claimed the French throne. However, not all subjects of France welcomed this new king to the throne. This struggle for the throne, along with the economic hardships and ideological rifts between the two nations, would ultimately result in many battles being fought between the two nations. Joan's family lived in poverty, and as a young girl, she was expected to perform chores such as tending to the family livestock and helping her mother with sewing and other household tasks. At her home, the daughter of poor farmers never had an opportunity to study, and consequently could neither read nor write. The daily labor performed by the Jones family was so laborious with the cultivation of crops that the family's attendance at church was very infrequent. The family, however, was very religious, with a strong level of commitment to Christianity. At age 13, the daughter of a poor farmer began hearing voices and had visions, which she claimed to be from God. The voices instructed her to take on the role of leader of the French resistance against English forces occupying France. One of the examples of the first time Joan heard a voice occurred while she was in her father's garden, and the sound was believed to be coming from a church. Joan also stated that the first voice was Saint Michael, and that she could physically see and feel the presence of the saints identified by the angels who spoke to her as well. In addition, Joan disclosed that over time she began hearing voices from Saint Margaret of Antioch and Saint Catherine of Alexandria. Joan of Arc claimed that the voice she heard was from an angel as well as being God's. She said that at one point in her life, "I believe this voice comes from God, and by His command, I believe as firmly as I believe in the Christian faith." She also described the voice as being very beautiful, modest, and sweet. After her first encounter with the voice at a church, the voice continued speaking to Joan and emphasized that she had been given a mission to fulfill. Joan needed to speak with Charles, the heir to the throne, to make her case to him regarding her mission. At one point, a man named Johann Laxard, who was married to one of Joan's cousins, took Joan to the town of Aquilure to be introduced to Captain Baudricourt. Unfortunately, the meeting did not go very well, as Baudricourt was skeptical of Joan's story and did not trust her words. Nevertheless, Joan continued to pursue her mission, and after approximately 1 year, Captain Baudricourt agreed to send Joan to Chinon with a security detail. At that point, from her head to her toes, the young peasant girl had been dressed in masculine attire to meet the son of the king. When Joan arrived in the city of Chinon, her first stop was the royal castle, where Charles VII was the heir to the throne. When she entered the castle, she piqued the interest of the heir as well as Captain Baudricourt, who was skeptical of the girl. It was during this time that Baudricourt decided to dress as one of the noblemen and attempt to mix himself into the groups of noblemen and women in one of the rooms in the castle to test the peasant girl. Before this meeting with the heir, the peasant girl had never met him. Therefore, under normal circumstances, she would have no means of identifying him from the crowd unless there was a divine connection between them. But the entire assembly was astounded to see, as soon as she entered the chamber, she recognized Charles VII as soon as he was introduced to her. After being introduced, she took on the title of Joan the Maid. However, even though she was able to identify the heir so quickly, more proof was needed to verify that she was capable of receiving divine instructions. The peasant girl was subjected to the same battery of tests as the young woman, as she had also claimed to be a virgin and therefore pure. The first test was a physical test to confirm her virginity, which involved the assistance of the ladies of the court and Yolande of Aragon, Queen of Sicily. They then conducted a spiritual test to converse with her personally, praying and asking many questions regarding her life and faith. Joan provided answers that showed she was clear-minded, composed, and confident. After receiving this verification, she was dispatched to Poitiers, where she was interrogated by numerous distinguished theologians who have expertise in this area. Upon completion of this inquisition, and after subjecting Joan to many questions, they issued the following report based on all the evidence. We observed that she acted in public and in private with no sign of evil, but only with goodness, humility, virginity, integrity, i.e., integrity of faith, and simplicity. Her equanimity and her full determination to lead the French army before members of royalty and the church were thus endorsed after she had passed all of the tests and secured the confidence of the church and royalty. The maiden requested that they compose and deliver a letter to the British monarch. The letter dictated by the maiden stated that God chose her as the new military commander and that she would use whatever means necessary to evict the British from France. If they failed to leave peacefully, the maiden claimed that death awaited them if she discovered them. Additionally, the maiden stated that, should they fail to understand her through her written words, her war cry would echo throughout France for 1,000 years. The maiden made it clear that the divine forces commanded the expulsion of the British from French territory. Finally, the French court and the Uhlans accepted the maiden's claims of purity and truthfulness. They recognized that by refusing the maiden's request for command of troops and to lead battles to defend her country, they would be defying a command directly from God. The king showed his trust in her by handing her a sword, and from that moment on, preparations began. Initially, Joan was outfitted with impressive stylings. First was specially made armor for her as a woman. Then there was a banner created by a French artist from Tours, featuring France's national emblem, a golden fleur-de-lis, paired with Jesus and Mary, illustrations of Christ held aloft by angels. Lastly, a beautiful white stallion was gifted to Joan. As such, it took her time to adjust to the weight of her armor, riding upon this new steed, and proficiently swinging her spear. Eventually, the three became second nature to her. Many were astounded at how quickly Joan became a master of each, the three pieces, and Joan's limbs flowed along with their motions easily. Once Joan had observed her appearance with her ship-cropped hair and all-white attire, holding the banner over her head while on horseback leading the troops, she headed toward Orléans. Joan was to liberate Orléans from the English who had controlled that area for a number of months. As Joan and her army approached Orléans, her enemies derided and defamed her. The people emotionally mocked Joan of Arc, labeling her a peasant girl who could lead men into battle, and did not take her seriously. They were happy to insult and provoke Joan of Arc, who, despite this, returned their insult with discipline and perseverance. Irrespective of the naysayers, Joan of Arc remained motivated by accomplishing her mission of liberating Orléans. Foremost was her participating in a battle at Tuyelles when she was shot in the back with a crossbow just above the shoulder. French troops were dangerously distraught as they nearly forfeited the mission. Joan of Arc bravely rose to the occasion and encouraged her troops to fight. Joan inspired her troops to take the battlefield against their adversaries, striking terror in the hearts of their English opponents. In fact, on that occasion, a captain who had previously ridiculed Joan of Arc subsequently leaped into the creek and disappeared forever. Joan of Arc was quickly becoming the star of the show, displaying the leadership qualities of a true warrior and commander, accomplishing the mission of driving the enemies from the city of Orléans in 4 days. The achievement at Orléans had great benefits for the French army and for the morale of the nation, and Joan's name, previously recognized by both the English and French people, became well known, and the mockery and ridicule of the English soldiers changed to respect for the French military leader and an apprehension of what lay ahead for them following the lifting of the Siege of Orléans. Following the victory at Orléans, Joan urged Charles to travel to Reims to receive his coronation, as Charles had not yet received the official title of King of France. Joan believed that the coronation was the fulfillment of God's will, and on July 17th, the Sunday of the coronation, she led Charles to Reims, where he was to be crowned King of France, and hundreds of supporters, such as relatives of Joan of Arc and noblemen, were gathered in the cathedral Reims to witness the ceremony. It was Joan's belief in the divine guidance that permitted her to liberate Orléans and participate in the crowning of Charles VII, in addition to many other accomplishments she attained during her short life. In addition to the many victories at the Moon, Jargeau, Beaugency, and Patois battles, Joan of Arc amassed a number of achievements that further solidified her image as a peasant heroine with a special and great destiny. Prior to her missions, however, Joan of Arc was about to experience a tragic fate. The French army saw great success from Joan of Arc's efforts to follow the orders given by the heavenly voices. As well as freeing the city of Orléans and supporting Charles as King of France by guiding him to Rouen for his coronation, Joan's devotion and achievements energized the citizens of France and inspired the direction of the French army. However, with continued success on the battlefields, the French royal government made the decision to harden the terrestrial gains that it had achieved and began negotiations for peace, therefore suspending what had been until then offensive campaigns on behalf of France. As a result, most of the soldiers in the French army were sent home, therefore leaving Joan's position greatly weakened in her efforts to fight against France's enemies. Joan continued to fight, even though King Charles VII had not come to her aid. She marched the French army into Compiègne city, which had been under the command of the Burgundians, who were allies of England. This battle ended in a total defeat for the French due to their being outnumbered and arriving at Compiègne without proper weaponry. During combat, Joan was captured by the English after being surrounded. With Joan now in English hands, they could now execute their plan to destroy her and her image. The peasant girl who was once viewed as a heroic leader for the French army had already inflicted significant damage upon the English. They no longer had a way to eliminate Joan, so they decided to accuse her of being a heretic because she wore men's garments, which the Roman Catholic Church prohibited according to Scripture, and seemed to be tantamount to a diabolical source of inspiration. Thus, condemning her was politically motivated. Let us also remember that Joan received the support of King Charles VII of France. If viewed as a sorceress, a heretical King Charles would have been demoralized by her initial imprisonment at the castle of Auboluy-le-Fontaine and subsequent transfer to the castle of Beaulouvre. Ultimately, she was taken to the city of Rouen in northwest France, where she would be tried and sentenced under the direction of Bishop Pierre Cachon, who was in loyalty to King of England. While imprisoned within the dark, dank, and cramped confines of the castle of Rouen, Joan of Arc understood that her future was uncertain and her darkest moments lay ahead. The humiliation and pain of captivity at the hands of her enemies was a source of much suffering for Joan. An interesting fact related to Joan's capture and imprisonment is that she made 2 unsuccessful escapes during her confinement. On January 9th, the day before her trial began, Joan requested to attend Mass, but this request was denied by the bishop throughout all subsequent events related to her trial and execution. Joan requested the Pope to know about her case. The request was turned down by the trial officials. The trial took place in court and at the jail where Joan was held. During this trial, Joan exhibited acts of bravery, courage, faith, and determination. At the initial interrogation, the judges requested Joan to take a sacred oath, which would require her to tell the truth. Joan did not seem very serious about taking this sacred oath. She replied that she may not answer all the queries of the judges. She was ready to tell the judges everything about herself as a peasant, as well as about the family, but she would keep her revelations concerning the divine secret because she did not think she could divulge them. However, after being repeatedly pressed by the judges to take the oath, she finally did, but reiterated to them what she previously stated concerning the sacred oath. She told the judges again her personal information, her name, her supposed age, 19, where she was from, and the prayer she prayed. During that conversation, she recounted having been told by her mother how the voices first began to appear when I was 13, all coming from the church. She talked about how the voices told her to have courage and be strong, and in doing this, God would protect her. When she was finally confronted, she very boldly and forcefully faced the bishop and told him, "You say you are my judge, so be careful, because I am sent by God. You are in great danger." In general, she was always courageous and confident in herself throughout all of this. She argued back and forth with the clerics, often providing them with new questions and refusing to answer some questions. Nonetheless, the clerics kept on harassing her, trying to find inconsistencies in what she said and expose flaws in her story. The clerics' witnesses claimed that she was making up the voices and visions, either as demonic manifestations or out of stupidity. Any of the above options would convict Joan of Arc. Many have maintained that although Joan was confronted by many elements of bad spirits throughout her experiences, she demonstrated an indomitable spirit of courage, and although she believed strongly that the voices' promise of her ultimate freedom would come to fruition, she could not escape death due to her alleged crimes. Despite demonstrating an immense level of courage when answering questions, this still was not sufficient to keep Joan from being sentenced to death by burning in the market square of Rouen, France, when she was found guilty of multiple offenses including idolatry, blasphemy, witchcraft, etc. When she was put to death, she was brought to the area of the execution just after 8 in the morning, at which time she was placed on the pyre to be executed. During the execution, Pierre Cochon made a short speech about Joan's life, as well as explaining some of the reasons why she was convicted and condemned. The end of that speech was the final sentence during which Pierre Cochon sentenced Joan of Arc to death. She was tied to a stake, then burned until the flames reached down to her lower limbs and traveled upward throughout the rest of her body. Those who witnessed her execution said as she was consumed by flames, she repeatedly shouted the name of Jesus Christ. The population was moved by this act of martyrdom. After the flames died out, Joan's body was put on display, then burned again until it was reduced to ashes. It is said that the ashes were thrown into the river Seine to prevent her grave from becoming a site for religious pilgrimages. Thus ended the French national heroine sometime in 1456. A short time after her death, Pope Calixtus allowed the Church to conduct an extensive investigation of the indictment, conviction, and trial of Joan of Arc. This examination by the Church resulted in Joan being officially exonerated from her charges of witchcraft. After that time, public opinion toward Joan of Arc began to change. However, well before this declaration by the Pope, Charles VII's image of the courageous peasant girl had already begun to change. At the end of 1450, Charles VII shared his views on the death of Joan of Arc, indicating that misunderstandings had played a large role in the unfairness of her so-called trial, and the cruelty she had suffered by her enemies. At a ceremony in 1455 at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, in front of Joan's mother and brother Pierre, there was a public acknowledgement of the injustice that had taken place during her trial and the conviction that resulted from it, and it had been decreed that the case would be subjected to further investigation. Evidence and analysis regarding Joan's case had begun by early June 1456, at which time the group of judges who were responsible for the investigation ruled that the articles under which Joan of Arc had been convicted were invalid because they were established in an unjust, biased, and fraudulent manner.
In essence, the need for a comprehensive reassessment of these conclusions not only led to their annulment, but also the sentence. Consequently, these same judges ordered that a cross should be placed in the square at the site of Joan of Arc's execution. The myth surrounding Joan of Arc began to grow at this time, and since then, there have been various ways in which Joan's achievements have been acknowledged and appreciated. For example, Napoleon Bonaparte officially classified Joan of Arc as a symbol of France in 1908, and in 1908, Pope Pius X confirmed the miracles of Joan of Arc by certifying the cure of 3 nuns who were cured of their illnesses by the power of prayer. Since the time of Joan's death, many thousands of people have experienced her miracles through the intercessory power of God. This understanding led to her recognition as a saint in the 1920s and a beatification by Pope Pius X, which is equivalent to a full canonization by Pope Benedict XVI and is recognized by all those who believe in the Catholic faith. The story of Joan of Arc has remained exceptionally interesting throughout history and is movingly depicted. Joan of Arc's amazing accomplishments are a testament to the strength of a simple peasant girl in the 1400s who led armies and accomplished many things during the 100 years of war. The story of the young peasant girl who became a warrior and the saint continues to inspire new generations. You.